Hello everybody, hope you're all well. I got off work here, had supper. It's time to have a good talk here. I seen Mark Friesen go live and the PPC narrative. I know the Liberals narrative, all on UNDRIP. It all ties into colonialism and the Crown, specifically Crown land. We know what Merkel and Prince William were in the media over, where everybody's going with that. It's all way off base, out of reality, all of them. I hate to say that, even PPC, way out and out to Lunchville. Liberals, completely out to Lunchville. And there's a reason for that, Canadians. And I'm going to explain all that. And just before I do that, I found one constitutional power of a citizen in a specific industry, and that's myself. It was interesting today as I go through my nuclear training. I would love to disclose it to all of you, but I don't know what that would do with my job if I did. But I found a right of a Canadian citizen in regards to nuclear that's not found anywhere else in Canada. And it's a new right and freedom we have, and I think that has everything to do with proliferation. If you ever go into the nuclear industry in Canada, you'll find out you get a specific right that's not afforded to any other Canadian. So that's interesting, very interesting. I'm going to share that with academics privately. I wish I could, everybody, but I'm not going to lose my job over it. It's kind of interesting, but going on to UNDRIP now, this is even more important for First Nations people. When we hear the term crown anything in Canada, when they say crown, that is not the UK anymore, hasn't been that way. I say it time and time again since 1952. Crown is a nice sneaky way in Canada of saying Prime Minister or down the line Premier of any province, okay? There are also other crown powers afforded to those two positions in Canada. Governor General affords that to the Prime Minister. Lieutenant Governor affords that absolutely to each and every Premier. And then double back to the Prime Minister. So the Prime Minister has a lot of sway over the Premiers, okay? All through colonialist power embedded in our Constitution. Nothing to do with the United Kingdom or Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, the reigning monarch. The portion that the media likes to talk about, they say, oh, this is bound constitutionally and Justin Trudeau too, and then other portions of the monarch just being there for symbolism. Well, yes, that's true. There's a symbolism for Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, but absolutely all of the constitutional power of Crown and Her Majesty belongs absolutely to Prime Minister. First and foremost, then it's on to the premiers of every province and territory. Do not kid yourself. When you hear the term Crown land federally, that's Prime Minister's land. Whichever ruling party elected a Prime Minister, all that land is Prime Minister's land. Not Indigenous, not First Nations, not anybody. It's Prime Minister of the ruling party's land. Just as provincial land of every province and territory divided into provincial crown land is absolutely the Premier's land, going through Lieutenant Governor back to Governor General, and that's why Premiers aren't able to move as well as they would like to. There is a promissory there inherited from the UK to settle all the claims. Now we're going to get into UNDRIP. Is the UN Declaration on Indigenous Rights a bad thing? Well, it absolutely is if you're a Canadian First Nation citizen, but let's transcend our continent. Let's go across the ocean to a place called Africa with quite a few number of countries inside it, where the mass majority of the population is Indigenous. UNDRIP works very well for African descendants and those who are actually African indigenous to the land, the blacks of Africa. They were brutalized through colonialism. Here we go again. They went through all that. They've been fighting, rebelling. They've even had other groups, other countries come forward with their own brand of imperialism and colonialism. It wasn't just UK, although UK had the largest impact. We get into France, Spain, Portugal. The list of atrocities goes on and on. The big difference is here, Africans weren't wiped out of the continent, okay? They were never sitting, those people, in a minority. They were treated as an inferior species. That's the history of Africa. Why UNDRIP works extremely well for Africa. When you start looking at the face of the politicians and the face of the political structure, that they've all gone independent. I'm going to ask every Canadian right now, because it's really is a first, second, third class thing here in Canada. The whole first class system we have, which is most of our media, absolutely all of our politicians, they give a narrative. They say, rights and racism, this and that. Do you ever hear any of them ever at one time ever call for Indigenous First Nations people to be in positions of government like it is in Africa? And how UNDRIP works really well there when you're being ruled in the majority by the Indigenous society. Here, most of the First Nations were eradicated, especially all on the outskirt boundaries of the provinces. All the Indigenous went into the interior, which is Alberta, some of northern BC, but we got northern BC, Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba. And absolutely, per person per capita, the most First Nations to populations in Canada are in my home province, Alberta. Some really big reserves there. Very tiny. You have a lot of people caged, literally fenced into an area predetermined by the government. It's been this way since the Indian Act. They get a small little portion out every month to take care of the reserves, which you can't live on those. If I fenced any Canadian, even if it was an acre or two or three I gave you, you could not be self-sufficient in this world today, but it's expected that First Nations do. Nothing like this measures even remotely close with a lot less population per capita in the United States. The average American Indian, which is the same peoples as the First Nations of Canada, enjoy 500 times the land that the average First Nation Reserve Indian gets in Canada, according to the Indian Act. Very atrocious. There isn't another place in the world with this kind of serious human rights abuse, and why UNDRIP absolutely does not work to address any of that. For one, UNDRIP is designed for Indigenous to rule themselves. Do you see Canada's version of UNDRIP giving the First Nations people across Canada massive more land claims, rights to self-determination, self-government, and the rest of it? The answer is no. Because we have Crown Land Federal, meaning Prime Minister's land. Sorry, this is a news flash for everybody. Then we have Provincial Crown Land, meaning Premier's land. Administered through Lieutenant Governor, up to Governor General, right back to Prime Minister. The political parties established in Canada, across all boards, all aisles, absolutely every single one of them, do not want to settle the claims, want to cage a peoples and Indigenous peoples in tiny, tiny little pieces of land in a massive country that 38 million people inhabit, with swaths and swaths of land nowhere near anywhere else in the world. that was heavily populated at one time, but eradicated of the indigenous people. Not like Africa, okay? Two different things happened here. And those indigenous people still can't even get a break. At least 500 times the land that they're put on now. A viability of first choice. That's what I've always put forward. At least try to match the United States. At least give self-government, self-determination. A percentage of the available land to get the GDP value so they can scratch out a living and have a real peoples unto themselves with no control from Canada or the politicians whatsoever. But that's not what Canadian politicians from any party want to do. They blame again the UN. It's all the UN's fault. Nothing to do with the Canadian politicians. It's wrong. It's atrocious. Our journalists in the Canadian Society of Media are sick, perverted, disgusting. I've tried in politics to get this out there. I've went out live on stage. They just roll the cameras down. They will never address the absolute truth. That the worst human atrocity today, besides maybe the Uyghur Muslims in China, is and has always been the First Nation people of Canada. USA solved this crisis with their American Indians a long time ago. Is it the end all and be all? Maybe not, but I'll tell you, it's 100 million times better than what the First Nations people of Canada go through. Imagine no self-government, no self-determination, and let me build a fence around you and stick you on a little small plot of land, whether that can yield a livelihood or not, and that's all you get. It's wrong. And if anyone's true to themselves and they look in their heart, you know that if you were locked, or even if I fenced a town as it is, any town in Canada, and said you can't go out for any resources outside of this, you wait for a $400 monthly check from the government. That's the best we're going to do. You're all going to live in squalor. You're never going to get ahead. You're never going to go anywhere. Aaron O'Toole, Justin Trudeau, Jagmeet Singh, People's Party, Maxime Bernier, the Green Party, I don't even know who that woman is. It doesn't matter. Bring forward your political party. They're all out to lunch. Gross, disgusting, way out there in left field. Telling all of you that a boogeyman called the UN is responsible for all these problems and this evil UNDRIP agreement, which doesn't work. I say to the First Nations people, you're getting screwed over. You're not in a position of power. You're not in an elected position. You're not that crown authority. They're not giving you that. They're only cementing theirs, and they're going to continue to dictate to you and break the people down as they keep raising the population in Canada until you're such an absolute tiny minority, if not extinct, through what is literally genocide, what they've been doing since the dawn of time here. That's Canada. Whether people want to hear this or not, this is the absolute truth. No matter what anyone tells you, and anyone telling you anything else is a sick, disgusting human being. Look at the size of this country. 5.14% of it to the First Nations people. First choice, self-government, settle the claims. Why will no government do that? How greedy, sick, and perverted could you be? But in order to settle the First Nation claims, that would require a political party to get elected and actually give back to all the people and end it all. Get rid of the sick, perverted colonialism, the embedded crown, which is not Queen Elizabeth II, only in visual, only in ceremonial, but but the absolute authority and power rests with your dirty, filthy, sick, corrupt politicians. Every single one of them. And not one of them wants to even go forward with the truth. Oh, no, we'll get elected. We'll take that power. Don't worry. We'll be better than the last. Who wants to be in an absolute autocracy? I know the First Nations never wanted to be, and it's never gotten any better for them. The worst treated peoples in the world. USA shies away from this because they're afraid that somehow it's going to bring back their atrocities committed in America of the time. But I don't think so. They addressed their issues. You can't change the past, but you can stop atrocities like Richard Nixon did way back in American history, ended it. And first, the American Indians never been better than at any other time since than they are in the States now today. But that's not the case in Canada. It's disgusting. It's wrong. It's the most atrocious abuse of human beings. I would say even worse than the Uyghur Muslims because of the time frame we're talking about here. And political party after politician, they get that crown, they put it on their head, and then they perpetuate it too. UNDRIP will do nothing to address the atrocities or move the First Nations people forward because you're not in government. We're under embedded colonialism here in Canada. I say this multiple times so that people can get it through and get it out there. I need this video shared. It's important because it's the absolute truth, the legal truth of the world we're in today and the country called Canada that we all live in. This is truth. Absolute 100% truth. Thanks, everybody. Enjoy your night. That's my video today. A very, very important one. Get it out to all the groups. I don't care what they classify themselves as. Ask them, where are your international experts to prove otherwise? Because I have a whole pile from Africa. There's 144 nations that signed UNDRIP, and absolutely who's in power where, and they're indigenous in their own region of birth. That's not the case for the First Nations in Canada. Not by a million miles. Not even close. UNDRIP only grants the power to now Justin Trudeau, or could be Aaron O'Toole, or maybe Jagmeet Singh, and it will never, I repeat, never, ever end up in the hands of the First Nation peoples of Canada. If anything, it's only going to strengthen the genocide against you. As absolute authority rests in the crown, which again is that elected politician. If you read UNDRIP, how does that apply to an unelected First Nations or recognized First Nations in the UN country called Canada that's absolutely embedded with colonialism, with nothing but an act of parliament called Indian Act? You're not even a registered peoples. You're under an act of legislation, Indian Act. It's the grossest, worst human rights violation, trumping anything in Africa today by a very, very large margin. It should be all on the docket with the United Nations Security Council. But we got issues with UK and their fears. We got issues with France, their colonial fears. How is that going to relate to what they did in Africa? What about the Métis out of Quebec? This is the problem we have. It's not an American problem, even though they're scared, well, what's going to happen with the American Indian? But again, they settled the American Indian. The American Indian isn't in the same situation as their absolute same people, First Nations of Canada. Dividing the peoples in half, regardless of the region or boundaries. These ones we cage like animals and remove all human rights because they're not recognized in the UN. And UNDRIP isn't going to help in that area at all, only make it worse, as it's a non-binding, not legally binding international agreement, meaning the UNSC didn't take it on, which means it's only Canada strengthening its claws into the First Nations, administering more control to the point that they won't even have to settle the claims or give you your rights to self-government and self-determination because they'll have had you eradicated through genocidal means, which we all know is what they're doing now. Search your souls, Canadians. It's wrong. Your government's absolutely wrong. As they strip all of you of all your rights, they are only going with the narrative to hurt the First Nations people even worse than they already have. This is my video. Like it or not, share. It's very important. Bye now.